Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited for today's episode, which features Justin Rush, the founder of JGR Financial Solutions. Now, I have known Justin for several years as we were both on the NAPFA Genesis board, which, if you're not familiar, is the group in NAPFA for financial planners that are 33 and under. So I knew this interview would be great because he has such an awesome story, but it was even better than I had expected because there were a lot of things about Justin's career that I honestly wasn't aware of. So it was really fun to learn about his path. During this interview, we cover kind of his discovery of the career of financial planning, how he learned what real financial planning was, and what ultimately led him to launch his own firm back in 2009, which actually didn't work out, forcing him back into the job market. So Justin went on to launch a firm the second time around this year in 2015 and was able to bring about 60 client relationships with him, which put him in a much better position than his original attempt to start a firm 6 years prior. So for the firm owners out there, I hope you listen to Justin's story because I think it shows how an owner can facilitate a junior advisor ultimately leaving to start their own firm, even though you may prefer for them to stay on board at your firm. And you'll also want to hear what he says would have kept him at his old firm instead of leaving. And it includes a well-defined and signed succession plan. For the folks that are out there looking to start a firm, Justin is a great example of someone building a firm that supports the life he wants to live, which always excites me because, as you've probably heard me say before, we help our clients live great lives as financial planners, and yet we rarely look at our own great life. And I think Justin is a really good example of how you can live your great life and build a business to support it. Now, you can access the show notes and additional resources at xyplanningnetwork.com/21. And also remember to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP, where you can interact with our guest, with Michael Kitsis and myself, team members, founding members of XYPN, and the like. So it's a really great resource. So again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. This month's episodes are brought to you by TD Ameritrade Institutional, which provides comprehensive brokerage and custody services to more than 4,000 fee-based independent registered investment advisors. You can learn more about what TD Ameritrade is working on in episode 23 at xyplanningnetwork.com/23. Now, without further ado, here's my interview with Justin Rush. Hey, Justin, welcome to XYPN Radio. Thanks so much for being on, man.
Thanks for having me, Alan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on because you have a story that I think is going to resonate with a lot of younger planners. And I know you've been getting a ton of questions around your career, especially since you have recently launched your own firm. So I guess to kick things off, let's go back to kind of how you got into financial planning. Did you get your degree in financial planning?
Yeah, so really I went to school thinking I was going to come out the other end as an accountant, specifically going into public accounting. And so my major started in the line of accounting at Mount Union, a little small school here in Northeast Ohio that's known for its football team. But as I got into the accounting work, I kind of realized that perhaps personal financial planning may be more interesting to me. So the way Mount was structured had very similar requirements to graduate with dual degrees. So I tagged on. It was actually business administration, but had a financial concentration. So to answer your question, no, I didn't go to school for financial planning, but certainly there were a lot of components in it baked within the degrees. And I mean, truth be told, I find myself day in, day out using more of my tax background from the accounting track that I had than I do some of the financial things that were learned. So
were the financial classes like finance in terms of business finance, or were they more personal finance? Like, was it a CFP component in there?
No, Mount was not a CFP accredited school at the time. So it was a mixture of both corporate finance and personal finance, which wasn't all that appealing. You know, there's only so much time value of money and all the corporate stuff that you can take. But no, it was definitely a mixture of the two.
So then what was your kind of first job coming out of college with more of an accounting background, finance background kind of thing?
Yep. So actually, my career, if you will, began, I did several internships in school. But the one that really stuck out that kind of got me going here was I spent my senior year of college a couple of months in a Merrill Lynch office here
Oh, fun.
here in my hometown of Canton, Ohio. Growing up, one of my neighbors actually ran that office, so I kind of had an in there and had communicated to him that this was a passion of mine and a desire of mine to pursue this. So he gave me the opportunity really just to sit in and observe. I didn't get into any meetings or anything like that. It was more an administrative and kind of back-end investment research type thing. But I tell you, looking back, I didn't pursue anything full-time with Merrill Lynch, but the people there were very transparent with me in kind of the Merrill Lynch model. And it quickly became apparent to me that the focus was on asset gathering, and that's okay, but I realized it wasn't necessarily for me. So they were very quick to suggest that, hey, if this is the model that you want to pursue, you should probably start with a bank or an insurance company and really work on building your book of business, and then bring that book of business here. Of course, they would want that.
Sounds like a good deal for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I reflect back upon that, I spent the 2 or 3 months that I was there just getting to talk to some of the advisors. Most of them were younger, not fresh out of school, but maybe 5 to 10 years into their career. And that was pretty valuable advice that they gave me at the time. That kind of led me to pursue other opportunities. So after the Merrill Lynch, I call it an internship, but after that ended, I was able to find myself in a pretty large regional financial planning firm that was basically a fee-based firm. But one of the neat things about them is they were partnered up with a very large accounting firm. So a lot of their new business came from the accounting side, which meant they were growing very rapidly. So I got in. I don't know, the firm was probably 15 or 20 employees big whenever I joined them, and I saw some growth opportunities there. And it was a really, really good experience just to kind of get my feet wet in more than just the administrative side of things. I think the term that they used when I was there was second chair. So I got to kind of be that second chair with many of the advisors and actually getting into client meetings and learning really what comprehensive financial planning was all about. And they managed a significant sum of assets too, but really had a focus for planning. And it was quickly after I joined their team that I realized, hey, this is great. This is exactly what I was hoping to find. I love the value that comprehensive planning brings to the table. And it was very, very different than the Merrill Lynch experience.
So you were doing financial planning there, but they were attached to an accounting firm. So you're probably a bunch of tax planning work as well, or were the CPAs handling that on the tax side?
So the tax firm was actually handling most of the tax planning, preparation, all of that. Really then what it left us handling were more of the insurance needs. We worked with a lot of business owners, so there are retirement plan needs. And then just other personal planning things that come about, like investments, like estate planning, those types of things.
Makes sense. So for anyone that's in the Merrill Lynches of the world, because I know we definitely have listeners that are in that world, can you just kind of, and I'm not asking you to be overly negative or anything like that, but can you give them kind of a difference that you saw from the work that you were doing at Merrill Lynch when maybe you thought that was financial planning to the comprehensive financial planning work that you kind of discovered?
And again, I guess very high level, it may not be fair for me since I wasn't involved in any meetings, any client-facing meetings there at Merrill, but it was pretty obvious just in working with people that the goal was really asset gathering. And I still remember this would have been in 2006, so it was before the markets completely crashed. But man, the celebrations as Merrill Lynch stock hit its all-time high and as new clients would be landed. It was just people. There was one advisor that he loved to flaunt his Porsche that he had just bought. Oh, we're not getting negative here, are we?
I love it.
But no, it was very clear that when I went to the firm that ultimately I started full-time with right out of school, it was just a completely different mindset, that it wasn't just investment related. Certainly that was still a goal to gather assets, but more or less what I found was the asset gathering process was almost a byproduct of the financial planning that was done up front. It wasn't hey, let's have the prospect meeting and sell them on letting us become investment managers. It's more relational driven, and here's what we can do for you personally to align all of these areas of planning to better meet your needs. And oh, by the way, we just happen to manage assets. And that firm also, I mentioned they were fee-based, so they also sold a lot of the insurance that would be recommended. So just, I guess, a different mindset in terms of when people show up, what can you do for me and what all is included in your services. It's not just centered around the investments. It's more holistic.
Yeah, and I ask you that question because it has come to my attention that I probably take for granted that everyone knows what comprehensive financial planning is. And I was talking to a young planner recently that has been in a Merrill Lynch style firm for 3 years and said a family member called him and said, "Are you fee only or are you fee based?" Because they had heard something on the radio or whatever. And he said, "I don't even know. Like, I'm not even sure." Like, he didn't even know the compensation models. And so when he started looking into it, he said what he discovered was he wasn't really doing financial planning as you and I would call it. And so,
sure,
for anybody that's out there that is in this, like, what exactly is comprehensive financial planning? It's exactly what you just said, which is, it's no longer investment centric. My old boss used to say investments are 1/7 of what we do. And the rest of it is retirement and tax planning and insurance planning and estate planning and all these other pieces. And investments, certainly help us meet our goals, but ultimately that's not the goal of the client relationship. There's nothing wrong if that's what you want to do is focus just on investments, but that's not, we wouldn't call that comprehensive financial planning.
Yeah, and truth be told, to kind of tie that into the way that I practice today, certainly there have been people that have come knocking just for investment management. And truth be told, I have to kind of think about whether I even want to take them on as a client. But more or less, whenever a prospect reaches out to me, I walk them through the financial planning process. And if they're asking questions about investments or whatnot, I almost put the brakes on. Sometimes I probably overdo it, but in saying, hey, we're going to talk about this as part of the overall financial plan. But truly, I mean, in me putting myself in the consumer's chair, I would want to take the time to really build trust with an advisor before turning over my portfolio to them. And just from an advisory perspective, I think what better way to earn that trust than to show them more than just the investment side of the puzzle, but what you can do for them and the value that can be added.
Yeah, I think it's an important note that, if investments is what you love and that's what you want to focus on, great. And if planning is what you want to focus on, great. It's okay to work with clients that are looking for the service you provide instead of feeling like, well, I love doing financial planning, but I need to do this. I need to take on this investment only client because that's all they're looking for. And, I have found the most challenging client relationships I ever had were with investment only clients. And I made the decision of like, I'm not going to do that anymore because it's not my style. I mean, in an hour-long meeting, if I talked investments for more than 5 minutes, then I was annoyed. And so, but that was my client, and other people want a 50-50, they want to talk investments. Some only want to talk investments. So,
yeah, and it's tough because eventually with an investment-only client, the grass will be greener somewhere else. Because if the only value you're adding is return, or you think that you're communicating the message that, hey, I can do something that firm over there can't, well, eventually they're going to have a conversation with a friend or coworker or whoever that leads them to believe that they could find something better somewhere else. So
I totally agree. I do think you're constantly trying to prove value in basically alpha and beating the market, and that is not a game I really want to be in. So you're working with this firm doing kind of comprehensive financial planning. It sounds like it was growing. The firm was growing pretty quickly. So were you able to move up there past that second chair role?
I wasn't. And part of that was probably my own fault. I was 20, I would have left there at the very beginning of 2009. So I would have been almost 23, 24 years old at the time. So my mindset was I was ready to advance a lot faster than what I really was.
Sure.
And in hindsight, it's pretty easy to see that. But no, it was a great group of people that I was working with, very, very knowledgeable individuals. But truth be told, as I just started to kind of digest and see the growth opportunity there, it wasn't that there was a cap so much, or it wasn't that I couldn't grow there. It was just, I guess I found myself kind of longing for perhaps a slightly smaller firm environment where there might be more rapid opportunities for growth. And again, as I reflect upon that now, it's like, what were you thinking? There was no way you were ready to be a relationship manager at that time, especially given all the turmoil in the markets. at that time, but young and dumb and I don't know, whatever. But
we'll call it ambitious because I was the same way. I think I asked for equity when I was 23. Looking back now, I know why they said no, but I sure thought I was worthy. So, I don't know if they regret saying no, but probably not.
Yep. But no, interestingly enough, there was an advisor that they had let go kind of during the downturn in October or November of '08 that I stayed in touch with. And I was kind of trying at that time just to make sure that financial planning was the route that I wanted to go. And I confirmed that. And I got in touch with this individual, and he was giving it a go from scratch on his own. And boy, hey, that sounds appealing. So I loosely partnered up with him. And we formed a firm that, again, was fee-based, but we also set up an RIA. So from January of 2009 through, let's see, I think my wife told me I needed to go find a paycheck about April of 2009. He and I gave it a go, and we failed. I failed, I should say. He did pretty good, but things weren't progressing. Just, again, I attribute it to being overly ambitious, thinking, oh, this ought to be easy since the markets are in turmoil. Everybody will be looking to make a change. That couldn't be further from the truth. So, yeah, from January through April of 2009, I kind of tried going out on my own with this gentleman. And then when I realized that, you know what, this is a lot more difficult than I had anticipated starting from scratch, that's when I put my feelers out and found a fee-only firm in my backyard, literally, that was founded by a guy back in the 1980s that, long story short, he was transitioning away from the firm that he founded to set up his own shop again, taking a lot of his clients with him. But he needed me in more of a financial planning analyst role. And I certainly needed him, an established advisor, to mentor me and give me a paycheck. So it made sense for me to team up with him in May of 2009.
I did not know that you had made a go of it once before. So,
hey, I keep my failures to myself.
No, and we actually we had Katie Brewer on just a few episodes ago, and I kind of did the same thing where she gave it a go and it didn't work, and then the end of the story was that now she has gone on her own again, like you, and is making a much better go of it. And it could have been the timing. It just could have been not enough runway. I mean, there are a lot of things that play into that. But one of the things I think is really interesting is younger planners will call me and they'll talk about starting a firm. And they're always afraid that if they go try to start their own firm, that if it doesn't work, no one's going to hire them.
Sure.
Because, they just want to go start their own firm. Can you speak to that? Because you were able to get a job after, trying to make a go of it and it not working. Did you have any issues with that advisor in that conversation around, hey, I do own my own firm now, but I don't want to going forward?
No. And I did not have ownership of that firm at that time. There was a loose agreement in place, but gotcha. No, truth be told, I think that made me even look a little bit more attractive because, interestingly enough, one of the things he needed at that moment in time was somebody really just to come in and be more than a planning analyst, because there were only 4 employees that started out at that firm. And one of the things he needed to do was stay client facing with the 65 or 70 clients that he transitioned from his former firm. But that meant he needed somebody to more or less step in and kind of run the business, or at least get it started from the ground up. So that's where, one of the things that I had done from January through April was form the RIA and handled all the broker-dealer side, which that part wasn't applicable anymore. But I had literally just gone through all the process of setting up an RIA from scratch. So that was quite appealing to him, that he wouldn't have to be as involved as he had originally anticipated. So, and that's kind of a unique skill set that I don't know that everybody would necessarily have. But no, from a hiring standpoint, I think ambition says a lot. So I certainly didn't want to shy away from that. And I'm grateful that he didn't either. He could have seen it as a failure, but I think he saw it as, hey, here's this ambitious guy that is looking to be part of a smaller team, kind of got a good foundation right out of school, but now is really trying to find his way with a smaller, and the concept of fee-only financial planning had not even been introduced to me at that time. He was really the one that introduced it to me, but once I kind of started to get a feel for what that's like. Just philosophically, it made all the sense in the world. So.
See, I obviously agree. Just the experience of getting a firm started and running it is invaluable, because one of the knocks against young planners, I think, is that we don't know what it takes to run the firm and what it takes to start a firm. And whenever you go through that process, you really learn all of it. You learn bookkeeping and marketing and business development and technology and all of the nuances. Compliance is huge that it takes to run the firm, which I think makes you much more valuable. I love hiring entrepreneurs, and we hire them in XYPN because I think that they better understand what it takes to run the business, and I find a lot less friction because of it. So I think it's a valuable skill set to have.
Well, at the end of the day, you've got to wear multiple hats. And for somebody that just has a get it done mentality, I think you can teach some of the other technical things that they may not be as sharp as, but you can't necessarily instill in someone that entrepreneurial spirit that certainly I think this person was looking for, and a lot of other either established firms or advisors just starting out need to experience, even from an analyst. So
yeah, it sounds like that was a really great fit. Like you said, I mean, you brought a very unique skill set that he really needed at that time. So I guess kind of what was your progression with that firm in terms of just what you were doing career-wise and just, I guess, how long you were there?
Yep. So I spent probably about a year still serving in kind of that second chair capacity. I mean, formally being called a financial planning analyst, but really handling a lot of the back end stuff related to new financial plans and that type of stuff, taking meeting notes, follow up, that type of thing. And then we grew exponentially is probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but we had a very rapid pace of growth really for the 6 years that I was there. So naturally, there's only so many clients that any advisor can handle. But after about a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years of being in that analyst role, there was just this natural progression where, hey, he didn't have enough time. The other advisor didn't have enough time to be in all of these meetings and meet with all of these prospects. So I was kind of thrown into the fire, whether I was ready or not. It didn't matter. And looking back, he had done a really good job of mentoring me, and I think I was ready. So it didn't take me all that long to transition into an advisory role. And, mind you, I wasn't working with the higher net worth clients of the firm by any stretch of the imagination. But the clients I was working with, just average middle-class folk that wanted somebody to look after them. Truth be told, I found that I really, really enjoyed working with them and was able to take care of their needs. So we had to be a little bit selective just about who I would be introduced to up front versus who he wanted to get me involved with in terms of existing clientele. But I can honestly say that we never really sat down and had a formal discussion of, hey, you're going to work with John and I'm going to keep Jane, or it just happened.
It just kind of happened organically. So how old were you whenever you started handling some of those prospect meetings and taking on client relationships?
Let's see. So I would have been 25, 26. I guess about 25 would be when I started. It's been about 5 years.
And I ask because I do think a lot of firm owners out there are wondering, at what point can my, junior planner or my second chair become the first chair? And I do think sometimes they get caught up thinking, they have to go from second chair to first chair as their full-time job. And it's like, no, you can transition the same way you did, start taking on a few relationships and then more and more over time and be selective, be sure, if a $5 million prospect comes in, you're probably not going to turn that over to the 25-year-old, but a 25-year-old very well may be capable of managing, like you said, those middle class clients. Absolutely. And there is no cut and dry answer to, well, who am I qualified to, or who's going to be comfortable with me? I mean, everybody's different in terms of the advisor and the consumer. I mean, there are definitely some, and I don't work with just Gen X, Gen Y clients. I've got a lot of baby boomers
But certainly there's a lot of baby boomers that if they're sitting across the table, and even today there's a 30-year-old me sitting across from them, and I'm blessed with a baby face, so 30 really looks like 20.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
That's why I have a beard, is to age me past 19.
It would take me the rest of my life to grow my beard the way that you have yours, Alan. Kudos to you, but hey, where were we going with this? But no. Even today, I'm the owner of my own firm, and there will be a time, I'm sure, I'm yet to experience it since I opened my doors, but there will be a time where somebody, I don't know, they don't look at my website and see my pictures there or whatever, but hey, we get face to face, and all of a sudden, age becomes an issue. You know what? That's fine. I'm not going to spend a ton of time trying to talk around that. If that's really the only hindrance in us moving forward, then so be it. There's a lot of other people that would benefit from my services. So I think once I kind of accepted that, Alan, the whole concept of being 25 and being an advisor, it wasn't as intimidating as it may have seemed.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I was 25 when I went solo and had never managed client relationships when I opened my own firm. But so I was a little bit behind the eight ball, but I was afraid of people asking me how old I was. And and I finally, kind of like you, there just came a day where I was finally like, you know what? I'm just going to tell everyone how old I am. I'm just going to put it on my website. I'm going to put pictures. I'm going to put videos. I want them to know by the time they get to me that I'm young, that I have a Southern accent, that, that I don't wear suits and ties. Like, I want them to know all of this before they get to me so that I don't have to deal with that awkward prospect meeting. And I remember one person that I worked for, I said something about my age, and they asked me more about it. And I said, I view my age as my greatest asset. Being young is a huge asset. And they got really offended. They said, no, it's a huge liability because, no one's going to work with a younger planner. And I said, you know what? The difference is there are so many older planners out there. There's a plethora of them, but there's so few of us that are younger that it's an advantage, because if you want to work with an older advisor, there's plenty of them. If you want to work with a younger planner, there's not many of us out here. Yep. So, it actually, I think, plays in. And to your point, you can work with baby boomer clients because you're going to be there all the way through, honestly, probably through their death and through that, transition. So
that's the hope. That's the plan. But a real quick story that I think caused me to get over that hurdle of my age and am I really ready for this? I'll never forget this. There was a prospect meeting that, I don't know, they called 2 weeks in advance or whatever, that was on the calendar. And long story short, there were some scheduling issues. In other words, they didn't get onto our calendars the way that they should have been. So I remember one Friday being in jeans and just a sweater. It's kind of a dress down Friday in the office. And here comes this prospect into the office, completely unexpected. And I'm the only advisor there. The other gentleman was not there that day. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, how is this going to pan out? I don't have a choice but to meet with these people alone. And you know what? That meeting went really well. They hired me. Bam.
It's too funny.
Yeah, and it was a fairly large client that I still work with to this day. So honestly, had it not have been for that, I might have still had some of those mental hurdles of dealing with age or whatnot. But that kind of forced me to really test myself, and it went well. So.
I love it. There's nothing better than just getting thrown to the fire. And I do think there's, we all have different learning styles. And as entrepreneurs, you and I are kind of in this whole, like, let's dive into the deep end of the pool and find out if we know how to swim. Hopefully there's a lifeguard. Other people are more of we're going to walk in from the shallow end and learn how to swim as we go. And I think you just have to know your personality. Now, in that instance, it wasn't like you chose to dive into the deep end, but it's to embrace it. And, I think there are planners out there that would have rescheduled that client and said, sorry, so-and-so's not here, can't do it, need to go get dressed up, whatever. And just to embrace it and say, hey, let's see what happens. Worst case scenario, but they don't hire me. I mean, that's the worst thing that could happen. So.
Yep.
So you're working at this firm. It sounds like you started to build up your client base. Do you mind if I ask did you have any non-competes? Did you own your client relationships? I mean, was there any understanding there about how your relationship with the clients, or was it pretty just kind of up in the air like most advisory firms?
No, there was, yes, in 2009, I did sign a non-compete. So that was one of my big anxiety points earlier this year when I made the decision to transition away. But really, over the course of the 6 years that I was with that firm, we had grown from 65 legacy clients that this other advisor was able to transition away from his prior firm to when I left earlier this year, we were somewhere in the neighborhood of, it was over 200.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not quite exponential, but like I said,
most firms are happy to get one new client a month. That's insane.
We grew leaps and bounds, and it was fun. But no, there were, I was working, we were kind of split. It might have been 60-40 where he was working with 60%, I was working with 40, but really, I had over 100 relationships that I was involved in some capacity. So nothing was written in stone, but certainly we had a good understanding and a good idea kind of who I had gotten involved with. And there were a lot of the new clients that the other advisor had never met. So naturally, it wouldn't be right to call him their advisor.
Sure.
But yeah, that was certainly one of the things that as I, approached him about transitioning away was in the back of my mind, not knowing exactly what would be had with the non-compete that I signed in 2009 and how he would feel about me taking some revenue away from the firm.
How did that conversation go? Maybe I should ask before that. I mean, why open your own firm? I mean, it sounds like you had the keys to the kingdom, right? I mean,
yes.
I mean, what could you possibly have wanted out of owning your own firm that you couldn't get at that firm?
And that was the most difficult question that I was asked. You're not the first that's asked that to me. 65 clients asked that to me. And honestly, Alan, I wish there was a black and white answer where I could say, here's what was going on, that I didn't like or that I thought could be significantly improved. But really, I couldn't. The things that I can pinpoint and the conversations I had with him as I transition away were just, this growth has been great. I think some of it has caught us off guard. And where that left me was kind of more in a managerial position where we weren't a big firm, but we had 7 employees, I think, when I left. So I was overseeing 5 or 6 of them. So things like HR and just those were tasks that, I don't want to say I shied away from or couldn't embrace, but truth be told, I really just did not have a desire to embrace.
Fair enough.
I'll put that on me. So that was certainly something that I wanted to get away from. But the other reality, truth be told, I was the informal succession plan there. But I guess at the end of the day, just the concept of a better work-life balance or flexibility, whatever you want to call it, was something that was always in the back of my mind, even going back to 2009 when I failed at venturing out. But I guess I had kind of had a taste of that, and in the back of my mind that had always been a desire. But honestly, up until about a year ago, I kind of found myself thinking, hey, you know what? That was a desire of mine once upon a time, but perhaps here with this firm, I can tolerate some of these other things that have been put on my plate that I wouldn't necessarily have wanted, but just it's a natural byproduct of the growth we've experienced. So, yeah, like I said, I wish there was a black and white answer, Alan.
No, there rarely is.
There really wasn't. And that was probably the hardest thing for me to not only to communicate to the owner of the firm, but to my clients. And I can get into more depth of
we'll
how
definitely
I position that.
Dig into that. I think that a lot of times firm owners, when they hear you say that, or they hear many people say that, they hear lazy. And I encourage firm owners to understand that wanting a work-life balance when you're in your late 20s, early 30s is not lazy. It's not saying we don't want to work our tails off. It's just saying that we may not want to be at the office 80 hours a week running a firm that we don't own. And in many ways, we probably work more hours now than we did at our previous firms, but it's different, and it's not about working less. It's almost about living more and being very intentional with our time and having the choice that the time we spend working is in the way that we want to spend it and that it is supporting some of these other things that we want to be doing. So I think that's a very common frustration, and it's something that I always encourage firm owners to look at. Is say, look, if you want to bring on young planners and keep them, you're going to have to give them flexibility, which I think for that generation just doesn't quite make sense.
Yeah, and I guess the thing I'll add to that I've kind of beat around the bush, or maybe not even just yet, but just having a succession plan, a formal succession plan in place is so important, because at the end of the day, like I said, I was the informal succession plan, but as I started to get a little bit older and kind of saw the way the business worked and the clients that we were serving, I just started to reflect upon, well, what happens if he gets hit by the bus? Now, all of a sudden, there's 200 clients here that obviously I'm not going to be able to manage myself. There's 5 or 6 other employees remaining that, naturally, I think a lot of those clients would leave. Some of them, I should say, because he was able to bring a level of expertise that I don't have. Still to this day, I don't have and I don't desire. So I guess it wasn't fair for me to think that, hey, I could stick around here, and if he gets hit by the bus, I could just step in and the firm continues the way that it has been. That would not have been a fair assumption for myself, for him, for the remaining employees, or most importantly, for the clients. I mean, that was certainly another thing that we talked about, but that was another reason to answer the why of the transition.
Yeah, because an informal succession plan is nothing. That it's just it's an empty promise. And, I've kind of always felt like if you weren't willing to put it on paper, then it doesn't exist. And so we see that so often with this promise of ownership, this promise of equity, come in, help us grow the firm and then we'll sell it to you. But that never gets put in writing, which, I always ask firm owners, I'm like, would you agree to this deal? Like, would you agree to come in and work and spend, almost the prime of your career when you could be starting your own firm? Would you help somebody else grow their firm with a promise of maybe one day they'll sell it to you? I don't think so.
Yeah. And I think most people or most younger advisors hear that and immediately their minds go to the financial benefits of firm ownership, which truly that did not have an impact at all in my decision. This person that I was with, he's to this day, I still maintain he's one of the most generous men I've ever met in my life, whether it be financially or just flexibility time-wise. So that made it even more difficult for me to transition. But no, that's really wasn't a financial decision. It was just longevity of the firm, succession. Without that plan, it was just hard for me to see what would happen, kind of that catastrophic, he gets hit by the bus scenario. And that was something that, I didn't want to wake up one morning and have to all of a sudden scramble and to piece together.
I think it's a really good point, and it's probably something we don't talk about enough is the importance of the succession plan, not because, not necessarily for equity, and just kind of that peace of mind and understanding what the future holds. And as young planners, we are still financial planners. And I think we have a tendency to look into the future and kind of want to know where we're headed. So
absolutely.
So we've kind of been talking about the different pieces that, kind of made you want to start your own firm. So anything else to add about that conversation that you had with the owner of the firm when you were, I guess, making the announcement to him that, you were ready to go do your own thing?
No, I found myself in the fortunate position, Alan, that he was understanding, generous, you name it. I mean, really, he ended up seeing it as, well, hey, my job is done. I've mentored you. Now I get to set you free.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. When he said that to me, it's like, really? I know that's the type of person you are, but just to hear you say that, it just put my mind at ease. And a lot of the anxieties I had about approaching him just immediately went away then. And I know that not a lot of people would be able to have that same experience, but I'm certainly fortunate and thankful that that was the way things went for me. So
looking at transitioning, so you'd already had, you were the lead planner on a lot of these relationships. Obviously, if you were second chair or paraplanner your whole career, you probably would not have been taking clients with you, which I do know comes up sometimes in conversations with young planners. But what did that transition look like? So you had the conversation with the boss. What about conversation with clients? You said you had 90 something client? No, you said over 100 client relationships.
I was working with over 100. One of my goals of the transition, as I'm putting together my pros, cons, and kind of what do I desire list leading up to this, it was to significantly reduce the number of clients that I'm serving. So I put a list of about 70 plus or minus a couple of clients in front of my former boss and said, hey, here are the ones that I think I want to approach. We had a couple back and forths, nothing confrontational by any means. This was a completely amicable transition, but we cleaned up that list. And yeah, so then I said, all right, let's do this. And I started to schedule 70 meetings.
Whoa.
Yep. So that's really what I spent May, June, and July doing, is meeting with people. Actually, there were kind of two rounds of meetings, May and June, and I might have even started this in late April. But let's say late April through the middle of June, I met with people to tell them what was going on, saying, hey, I'm going to throw you a curveball. Here's what's going on, fielding all of their questions and getting through that. And then I had, seemed like right on the heels of that, another meeting with them from kind of the middle of June through the end of the summer to have the 65 that agreed to transition with me sign all the necessary paperwork.
So you were doing these meetings while you were still an employee of your old firm, and he was cool with that?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. There was, again, my situation's a little bit unique, but speaks to the generosity of him.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and one of the things, Alan, that I didn't want to do was leave my former firm high and dry. So I spent a lot of time just training and kind of filling in the gaps of for the remaining employees, just making sure that my responsibilities weren't overlooked and there would be somebody to at least step in and know what needed to happen.
That continuity. And I think that's huge. And I think it's really valuable from the firm owner's perspective too, to not just, kick someone out the door when they do this, because you are critical to that firm, and having that transition period is awesome. So what, if any, objections were you hearing from clients? I mean, how did that conversation go when you were telling them, what you were looking to do?
So honestly, I spent countless hours trying to be as proactive as possible in anticipating client questions. And for anybody looking to make a transition, whether it be from another fee-only firm or from the brokerage world or an insurance company, I think it's hard to do, because unless you can truly put yourself in the client's shoes, you're not going to be able to anticipate all of their questions. So I even pulled a couple of my really trusted clients aside and said, I know you're going to transition with me, you've already committed, but what are the questions I should be proactively anticipating? And fortunately, I think I had nailed a lot of them on my own. Just the why was the biggest question that I got. How will the client experience change? That was another one that I wanted to be able to address. Everybody wanted to talk about fees. Mm-hmm. What's going to change with my fees? What's up with this home office concept, and what's that going to look like? And what happens if you get hit by the bus? Justin, how are you going to handle all the administrative things that you had a wonderful support team for previously? So these were all, questions that fortunately I had anticipated. The one question, Alan, I think the whole summer that, I don't know, I probably met with my first 10 clients and I nailed it. I knew exactly what they were going to ask. And on that 10th client, this guy sitting across the table from me, he finally catches me off guard. And he looks me straight in the eye with a serious face and he says, Justin, are you still going to send me a calendar on an annual basis? And what this means is the guy I used to work for, my former boss, he was an excellent photographer. So he went around to various national parks. And every year we would put together a 12-month calendar, 12 pictures.
Oh my goodness.
Of some of his photographs. And, I knew it was appreciated, but this was the first time that, I was caught off guard. And he was very serious about it.
So did you get to keep that client? Are you able to send him calendars?
He transitioned with me. I'm not sending him a calendar yet. And wouldn't you know it, that after him, there were a couple of other clients that had expected that. So lesson learned there. You know what? It's not just the more obvious things that clients had grown to expect or like, what's my client vault look like? Am I going to get monthly statements from the custodian? Am I going to get quarterly statements from you? It wasn't just that, how often are we going to meet together? It was really even getting into the nitty gritty of the client experience and customer service, I guess, if you want to call it, that they really appreciated and wanted to make sure wasn't going to shift too much. And like I said, I think I did a really good job of anticipating most questions, but boy, that one blew me out of the water.
Always going to be a curveball. So for any advisors out there looking for a touch point, apparently calendars, excellent. It is a really good example of if you have a really cool hobby and incorporating that into the client experience and just the power that has. But who would have thought? Okay, so just to recap, you did a first round of client meetings to say, hey, this is what's going on. And were you asking for a commitment in that meeting and have them sign something? Or were you saying, go home and talk about it, I'll follow up? Like, how did you ask for the commitment for them to move with you?
Yeah, so this is where my lack of sales aptitude comes out. I can be very passionate about what I do, but I don't have an ounce of sales aptitude in me. No, I guess, so all joking aside, I was not asking for a commitment at that point. Certainly I had, and truth be told, I couldn't have had them sign anything at that point anyway, because I was still in the process of separating, forming my own firm, getting, Schwab to approve me from a custodial standpoint. So no, it was really just hey, here's what's on the horizon. I'm going to circle back with you in a month or two. And it's during that meeting that I will have all of the necessary paperwork. In the meantime, please reach out with any questions you have, and I'll be happy to address those. And honestly, I didn't hear from many people. So I was like, okay, June's rolling around, and I don't have firm commitments from many people at all. There were a handful that had called in and basically said, hey, let me speak to the owner of the firm. I want to make sure that the way you're positioning this was accurate, because he wasn't involved in most of those meetings.
Oh, sure.
It would have been way too time consuming. So I did, I guess, hear from a handful of people. And again, he was supportive of my transition. But leading up to those meetings in June, July, I really didn't know how many clients I would have or what my revenue would be. So there was some anxiety there.
Yeah. And that's probably, if you could go back, my sales coach told me a few weeks ago, she said, or I have a sales training coach that I've worked with in the past, and she said that some interesting research was showing that people that ask for the commit and then follow up have a 30% higher close rate than people that never ask. And, 5 or 10% is huge. 30% is massive.
Yeah, that is.
And so just having a call to action and being able to say, even if it's not sign on the dotted line, it's I'm going to follow up with you in a week and I'd like a commitment, yes or no, just so I know what to do. Like maybe that would have given you, reduce some anxiety. I doubt it really would have increased your close rate just because you maintained those relationships that you wanted to maintain, but would have been nice to know, didn't end up on your own with 10 clients.
Well, and for me, I guess I knew that even if they gave me a verbal commit, that until they signed on the dotted line, there was nothing there. And I mean, truly, Alan, you know how our profession works. Even somebody can sign an agreement, but I mean, it's a two-way street where they're free to quit anytime they want.
Right. There's no long-term commitments here.
Yeah. But yeah, certainly that might have been something I would have done a little bit different. I don't know what I could have done different because I would not have had the paperwork ready to go. But I guess it worked out, so I can't regret it too much.
Fair enough. And for folks that don't quite have the transition time, you probably would have your custodial relationship ready to go so that you could have had that paperwork in the meeting, because you would kind of gotten one shot at it if you didn't have the support of your former employer. But it sounds like you did it the way it made sense given the situation that you were in. Yeah,
I think that's true. And then truly, this all goes back to knowing your clientele. And I think I did it in the way that my clients really appreciated, where if I would have had that paperwork meeting number one and fielded all their questions, and then at the end of that meeting said, okay, now I need you to sign here. Mm-hmm. I think some of them would have balked at that idea.
That's fair.
But who knows?
So how many clients did you ultimately bring with you to the new firm?
65.
Wow. Okay.
The commitments. So I had a handful of, somebody said, so you had 70 job interviews this summer. Yep, I got fired a handful of times.
To get fired 5 out of 70 times, I think is totally fine. I've been fired from over half the jobs I've had, so which doesn't surprise anybody. So what did you do in terms of fees? Because my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you do have a different fee structure than you had at your previous firm. Is that correct?
Yeah, a little bit. So my previous firm, whenever we broke away in 2009, we went to a quarterly retainer, so just a flat fee flat annual fee billed on a quarterly basis. And a lot of the clients remain that way, but the new clients that we had taken on the past couple of years were more percentage of assets under management. So I kind of had a mix, and even within the AUM model, there were two different fee structures that I was working with. So I almost had three different fee structures that those 65 clients that agreed to transition with me were used to. Honestly, Alan, the last thing I wanted to do was rock the boat with the fee discussion. So there were maybe three clients that I either transitioned to a different fee structure or increase their fees. But the rest of them, I knew that I was going to get pushback if I took that as an opportunity to change their fees too much. So really it was just, hey, I'm not going to change your fees, period.
Okay.
Now, that was for the clients that transitioned with me. Now, going forward, I've adopted the monthly retainer model because truly, as I grow, I want to pursue the Gen X, Gen Y crowd, and I'm on board with that model. I think it's great and attractive, but at least for my existing clientele, I have not approached them about transitioning over to that model.
Do you foresee that as something that you'll, as a conversation you'll have with at least some of them, if not all of them, or do you just kind of see going forward, leave them where they were and then just with new clients kind of introduce this new fee structure?
Some of them I will have that, I may have that conversation eventually. My clients, they range in ages from 24 to 92. So yeah, for somebody that's, younger, kind of fits that Gen X, Gen Y profile, that's either for whatever reason we have been charging on an AUM basis or just there was a flat fee. If there needs to be an adjustment, then yeah, I'll probably approach them about the monthly retainer model. But truly for my baby boomers, retirees, I doubt that I approach them with that. Just, again, I don't want to rock the boat. Never say never, but I would not anticipate approaching them in the future, trying to change that model of fees.
Yeah, changing fees is hard. I mean, it's certainly a tough conversation. And the more transparent we become, the harder that conversation becomes to go from, whether it's raising fees or just changing the fee structure. Whenever they're seeing the fees on a regular basis, they become aware of it.
Yep, it's a lot more tangible.
Yep, and it becomes harder to have that conversation. And so folks do ask often, like, are you going to raise, that monthly fee? And I think it's tough to raise the monthly fee unless you can say, like, we're going to be rolling out additional services or whatnot. It's just that's a tough conversation to have. Yep. If you're adding tax preparation to your firm, okay, fair enough. You can add some sort of fee or do something, but I always recommend price it profitably to begin with because you don't want to end up on the back end regretting wherever your fee structure was.
Yep, no, that's true. And I had a couple of clients as I approached them, they asked me to reduce their fees. And I guess I had maybe a little bit more, maybe a handful that asked. And I said okay for a couple of them. Nothing significant, but right or wrong, during the transition, the 70 that I had approached, really they were the ones that I wanted to continue working with. And just kind of taking stock, and to your point, trying to remain profitable, but taking stock of their needs and the value that I was able to provide. Somebody twisted my arm and said, well, you're not going to have the overhead of a bricks and mortar. So, okay.
Too funny.
Well, for the most part, there wasn't a whole lot of pushback. One of the things I was anticipating, the other advisor that I worked with, he was an attorney. So we had done some estate planning that was included in the fee. And I was anticipating several questions about that, but honestly didn't get a whole lot of that because to some that could have been seen as a value add that no longer exists.
That makes sense. But I guess the flip side is maybe a lot of that work was already done.
Correct.
But yep. I mean, estate plans are always going to need updating. So in many ways, you actually dropped a few, or you at least dropped one service that they may have valued.
Yeah. Yep. That's accurate.
So what's the plan going forward? I mean, I suspect just based on what you've said, you've got revenue coming in, obviously, from these client relationships. Things are probably pretty stable right now. You got put in a position with the last firm where you were managing a bunch of people and it didn't sound like that was ideal. Do you see growing the firm, or do you see, capping it out at a certain number of clients so you can stay fairly small? I mean, what's the plan?
I think just by virtue of attrition, I will need to grow. And I've already, my website's been live since September 20th, I think. And here we are almost a month and a half later. And I've had 5 new clients as a result of being just online, it seems. So I'm going to grow, certainly. I'm committed to being more intentional about the growth, where if somebody shows up or comes knocking and they're not a good fit for various reasons, I'm going to be happy to point them in the right direction of somebody that would be a better fit. But, I know XY Planning Network spends a lot of time talking about niche marketing, and my clients are very diverse in terms of their background, so I can't necessarily say that I have one niche. I think I have several niches. In public workers around here, there's been a lot of uncertainty with especially the Ohio State Teachers Retirement Fund. So over the past few years, I started working with a lot of teachers. There's a mid-sized corporation kind of in my backyard that I've been able to get into, and I'm working with some Gen X executives. So I plan on just continuing to build those relationships and hopefully leveraging them to grow. But like I said, I find myself in the fortunate position where I can be more intentional about the growth. So I don't have to just accept someone just because they come knocking. But at the same time, I do feel called, and I remain committed that somebody does reach out. I admire that. It takes a lot of guts to make that call. And if I'm not the right person, or if I don't feel like I'm the right person to help them, then I'll certainly point them in the right direction. But in terms of staffing, I can see myself maybe hiring a virtual paraplanner or virtual assistant, call him or her whatever you want, but just for some help on the back end with more or less data entry, tax projections, some of the Money Guide Pro, that type of data entry. But long term, no, my growth plan does not call for another advisor, does not call for really any full-time staff. That's, like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I wanted to get away from.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to back myself into that corner again where I feel like I have to be somewhere at some time just to manage people.
And it does change the way that you have to operate. I mean, I'm in this position with XY Planning Network where we went from it just being a really small group, and now it's growing, and now there's staff to manage. And it is different than back in the day when I was just an advisor managing myself. That, suddenly I can still take days off when I want to take them off, but I still need to be sure I'm available to answer questions so they can get their job done and be sure they have the tools and the training and all of that they need. So I think it's okay to not grow the staffing if that's what you want to do. And I think that there's a lot of shoulds in our profession, that you should want to grow a big enterprise. And I think the truth is the only should is that you need to be focused on your own great life and build the business to support it, which it sounds like is exactly what you're doing. And it's being very intentional. And it's okay if you want to grow. It's okay if you don't. It's okay if you want to hire. It's okay if you don't. It's okay if you want a niche. It's okay if you don't, as long as you can make it work. It's just about being intentional, not just taking it as it comes.
Yep.
So to kind of wrap up, we'll ask you the final question, which you may have heard on previous episodes. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, go back to younger Justin. Maybe this was the Justin working, or thinking about launching his own firm that ultimately didn't work out, or inside of, one of these firms that you worked for. There's just one piece of advice you could go back and give yourself. What do you think it would be?
I would say just be patient, because through time, things will work themselves out. I like the way you put it earlier, just not young and dumb, but overly ambitious. And that's not a negative. But certainly, sometimes you need to just kind of gain control of that and keep it in the proper context. And I think patience is key as you're developing in any profession, but especially this one. So as I reflect back to 2009, I was probably a little bit overly ambitious, but I think things have worked themselves out for a reason, and I don't regret any of those decisions. But just be patient and stick with it, and over the course of time, things will go according to plan.
And learning patience is probably the hardest life lesson for us entrepreneurial types. It does not come naturally.
Shoot first, aim later. Yep.
That's exactly it. Well, Justin, thanks again for taking the time to be on. This was so much fun. So I really appreciate you being on today.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
What an awesome interview. That was so much fun to get Justin's story because there's so much about that I did not know. I think his path through his previous firm and then ultimately branch off and take clients with him is just so cool. And it's such a good example of how it can be done right. It doesn't have to be contentious or a big fight, that, it really can be done in a way that is healthy for both the previous firm owner and the junior advisor. I think his story shows the importance of having a written succession plan. So for all the firm owners out there to really pay attention to what are you offering your younger advisors to keep them on board? Because I think it's easy as firm owners to forget, honestly, that you probably wouldn't have taken the deal that you're offering these junior planners, which is basically an unsigned promise of ownership. And it's kind of an empty promise. And while there may be some trust there, it's really hard for younger advisors to bank their career on you following through. So I think it's definitely something to consider that, this firm owner could have kept Justin potentially had he, had a written succession plan in place that made sense for Justin's career. Now, remember that you can find the show notes along with additional resources mentioned in the episode at xyplannetwork.com/21. This month's episodes were brought to you by TD Ameritrade Institutional, which provides comprehensive brokerage and custody services to more than 4,000 fee-based independent registered investment advisors. Their advanced technology platform, coupled with personal support from dedicated service teams, allow investment advisors to grow and manage their practices more efficiently and effectively while optimizing time with clients. They provide a robust offering of products, programs, and services designed to help advisors build their businesses and do the best job possible they can to help their clients with their financial goals. Remember that you can learn more about what TD Ameritrade is working on at xyplannetwork.com/23. Thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.